I never imagined I'd spend my 60th birthday in a cold, sterile hospital room with a nurse gently pulling the curtain closed as she whispered, "The doctor will be in shortly, ma'am." Ma'am, I hated that word. It made me feel older than I already felt. Maybe it was silly to worry about such things at a moment like that. But when you've just had a biopsy and the doctor asks you to please bring someone with you for the results, your mind starts to latch onto anything at all, to avoid the looming shadow of what you already suspect. Brought Richard, my husband of 37 years, the man who held my hair back when I had the flu, the man who made Sunday pancakes, shaped like little hearts even after our girls moved out. The man who once looked at me like I was the only woman in the room, even when I wasn't. He sat beside me, quiet, chewing on a toothpick like he always did when he was nervous. His hands were clasped tightly in his lap. I noticed he hadn't touched me once since we walked into the room. Dr. Keating came in with his little folder and the grave expression of someone who'd had to do this 1,000 times. I didn't hear every word, but I caught enough. Invasive. Ductal carcinoma. Stage 2. Treatment plan. Chemotherapy. I didn't cry. I remember that clearly. I just nodded, my throat too dry to ask any questions. I could feel Richard stiffen next to me. He didn't ask anything either. The doctor left us with a pile of pamphlets and an appointment for the oncologist. I finally looked at Richard. He was pale. Sweat dotted his forehead. "I guess we'll get through this," I said almost apologetically. He didn't answer right away, and then he did. "I need some air." That was the beginning. He didn't come home that night. He texted. Texted, too. Say he was staying with his brother in Connecticut for a few days. To think. As if my cancer was a referendum on his life. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was scared. Maybe he needed time. Maybe he didn't want me to see him cry. But the days passed, then a week, then 2, and I was going to consultations, learning about ports and hair loss, and the exact rate at which my white blood cell count would plummet. Alone. When he finally returned, he looked different, like someone who had already decided to leave but didn't know how to say it. He stood in our kitchen still wearing his coat and said, "I can't do this, Susan." Those were his exact words. "I can't do this." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. For the "but I will." For the "I'm just scared, but I'll be here." But he just looked down at the floor, ashamed. Not enough to stay. Just enough to avoid my eyes. "I didn't sign up for this," he added, like I was a bad investment. That's when something inside me broke. Or maybe it didn't break. Maybe it woke up. You think you know a person after nearly 4 decades. You think love is bulletproof if it survived raising 2 kids, 3 moves, 1 miscarriage, and countless small disappointments and acts of forgiveness. But apparently, cancer was the deal breaker. He left the next morning. Just packed a suitcase, muttered something about needing to focus on himself, and walked out the front door. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I watched him go with a strange, eerie calm, like I was watching a ghost leave a body that had long been lifeless anyway. I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and canceled the upcoming anniversary dinner reservation he didn't know I had made. 38 years next month. I had even picked out a new dress, something soft, something hopeful. I closed the browser window. Then I cried. The first week after he left, I could barely move. It wasn't just the news, or the pain, or the fear of dying. It was the sheer betrayal of it all. I had loved him through everything. I had held his hand when he lost his job. I had stood by him when his father died, when he nearly drove us into bankruptcy chasing a doomed business idea. But now, when I needed him, really needed him, he turned into a ghost with a suitcase. I kept thinking, is this what I am now? A woman with cancer whose husband couldn't even pretend to love her through it? Friends tried to call. My daughters, too. I let most calls go to voicemail. I didn't want pity. I didn't want, how are you holding up? I wanted someone to tell me what to do when the man you loved decided you weren't worth the effort anymore. I eventually answered a call from my oldest daughter, Claire. She cried when I told her what happened, and then she said something I'll never forget. "He was a coward, Mom. You are not." That single sentence sat with me, heavy and warm, like a blanket draped over my raw, shivering self. I wasn't a coward. I had cancer, but I was still here, breathing, thinking, hurting, yes, but still alive. It's strange what your body remembers. Muscle memory, habits. Even when your heart is in pieces, your hands know to make tea in the morning, to feed the cat, to water the plants. You find yourself doing ordinary things in a world that feels unrecognizable. It was in those ordinary moments that I started fighting, not just the cancer, but for myself. Because if he could leave me when I was at my weakest, then maybe I had spent too many years being strong for someone who never deserved it. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning. The first time I walked into the infusion center alone, it hit me that sickness has a smell. It wasn't antiseptic exactly. It wasn't blood or bleach or anything sharp. It was more like a silence in the air, heavy and sweet and cruel. Like grief had a fragrance. I walked in with my port aching slightly beneath my sweater, a knit hat pulled over the hair I still had, though not for long. I didn't wear makeup that day. I didn't see the point. What was there to brighten? My skin was already losing its color. My eyes looked like someone else's, hollow, faded. I looked like the before picture in a pharmaceutical ad. I gave my name to the nurse at the desk, smiled faintly, the way you do when you've forgotten how to genuinely smile. She was kind, younger than my youngest daughter, with soft curls and a calming voice. "Have a seat, Susan. We'll get you started in just a moment." I sat, alone. The chair next to mine remained empty the entire session. All around me, women had husbands, sisters, sons, people holding their hands, adjusting their blankets, whispering stories to distract them. I had a paperback I couldn't focus on, and the distinct absence of Richard like a hole where oxygen should have been. The treatments hit harder than I expected. They don't warn you about the taste in your mouth. That metallic sour thing that makes every meal feel like chewing on pennies. They don't tell you that your dreams turn violent, That your legs cramp in the middle of the night like the devil's wringing them out with bare hands. That even your tears begin to sting your skin. But worst of all was the morning I found hair on my pillow. Not a strand, not a couple, a clump. Like someone had silently shaved part of me in my sleep. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I got up, took the scissors from the bathroom drawer, stood in front of the mirror, and I cut it off myself. Every last strand. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't pretty. I nicked my scalp more than once, but I did it. Because if this disease was going to take pieces of me, I wanted at least one act of defiance. One thing I chose. When I was done, I stared at the reflection of the bald woman with haunted eyes, and I said aloud, "You are still here." Claire flew in from San Francisco a week later. She walked through the front door and didn't cry, even when she saw me wrapped in a flannel robe, pale and fragile looking. Instead, she kissed my cheek and said, "You look like someone who just kicked cancer's ass." I laughed for the first time in weeks. She stayed for nearly a month, cooked soft foods, helped me walk on the days I couldn't find the strength, painted my toenails while we watched bad romantic comedies. She brought sunlight into the house. Even when I couldn't smile, she made the silence feel less heavy. And then one night, as she was helping me into bed, she hesitated. "Mom, he's dating someone." I knew who she meant. "Richard, my husband. I saw it on Facebook," she continued quietly. "Her name's Denise. She's younger. From his office, I think." I didn't speak for a long moment, not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. It wasn't the betrayal that stung the most. It was the ease with which he replaced me, as if I'd just expired. "Then she can have him," I finally said. "She'll learn soon enough." Claire didn't push. She just kissed my forehead and said, "You're doing better without him anyway." And for the first time, I thought, maybe she was right. My body grew weaker, but my will got stronger. There were days I could barely lift my arms, days I vomited until I saw stars, days where the fatigue made the world move in slow motion, and I questioned whether I could keep going. But even then, even in the darkest hour, something inside me refused to surrender. I started writing, just a little at first, a journal. Then letters I never sent. One to Richard, one to my younger self, one to God, or whatever was listening. It helped. Somehow putting the pain on paper made it more bearable. I started painting again, too. Not for others, not for galleries, or friends. Just for me. Angry strokes of red, splashes of cold blue, swirls of purple like bruises. It was chaos on canvas, but it was mine. One afternoon, mid-treatment, I decided to go to the farmer's market. I was bald, wrapped in a scarf, pale as a ghost. But I didn't care. I was tired of hiding. People stared. Some looked away quickly. Others smiled with that sad, overly gentle expression I came to despise. But then, a woman behind one of the booths handed me a sunflower. No words, just a flower and a quiet nod. I cried in the car, not because of pity, but because kindness, even the smallest kind, reminded me I was still human, still alive, still part of something. As the treatments went on, the scans began to show improvement. The tumor was shrinking. The doctor smiled for the first time during an appointment. My blood work looked better. My body, though bruised and battered, was still fighting. And maybe, just maybe, I was winning. I celebrated alone. I went to a little bakery in town, bought myself a slice of lemon cake, and sat outside in the sun. The breeze played with the ends of my scarf. The cake tasted like hope, and I whispered to no one in particular, "You didn't break me. Not the cancer. Not Richard. Not the loneliness." People like to say everything happens for a reason. I don't believe that anymore. Cancer didn't come into my life with a moral lesson. Richard didn't leave because fate demanded it. Bad things happen. People leave, bodies fail, and we are left to pick up the pieces. But what I do believe is this. Sometimes being shattered is the only way to see what you're really made of. And in those pieces, I found a woman I thought I had lost years ago. The last round of chemo came on a cold Thursday morning in March. I remember it because the cherry trees had just started to bloom outside the clinic windows, their soft pink petals a kind of quiet rebellion against the chill that lingered in the air. They looked so fragile, those blossoms, and yet they returned year after year without fail. I envied them for that. The nurse smiled when she saw me. "Last one," she said softly, as if afraid that saying it louder might jinx it. I nodded, too full of something. Gratitude, fear, exhaustion. To speak. It was strange, the silence that followed. After months of war inside my own body, of nausea and sleepless nights, of hair loss and weight loss, and the constant sound of monitors beeping, I was suddenly on the other side of it. Alive, but altered. Like the earth after a storm. The sky clears, yes, but the landscape never looks quite the same. The house felt bigger when I returned that day. Quieter, too. It had been that way ever since Richard left, but now the silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like peace. I walked through each room slowly, touched the fabric of the curtains I had chosen 10 years ago, traced the wood grain of the dining table we'd bought together, looked at the photos I hadn't had the heart to take down, the wedding picture, the family vacations, the anniversary dinner where he gave me a necklace I now kept in a drawer, untouched. For a long time I thought healing meant forgetting, but I've learned that some memories don't need to be erased. They just need to be reframed. Richard was part of my story, a large, painful part, but he wasn't the whole book, and he wasn't the ending. About a month after treatment ended, I got a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual letter in a plain envelope with his name on the return address. Richard. My hand trembled a little when I opened it, but my heart did not race. I didn't expect an apology. I didn't even want one. I was simply curious. It was short, a paragraph, maybe 2. He wrote that he was sorry, that he wasn't strong enough to watch me suffer, that he panicked when he saw the diagnosis, that he never stopped caring, but didn't know how to show up. He didn't ask to come back. He didn't beg for forgiveness, and I didn't cry when I folded the letter and placed it in the fireplace. Some fires don't deserve to be rekindled. They need to burn out so the ashes can feed something new. Slowly, life crept back in. My hair returned, Not the same. A little curlier this time. Almost silver in places. My strength returned in tiny moments. Walking to the mailbox without resting. Lifting a grocery bag. Laughing without pain in my ribs. And my appetite came back too. For food. For music. For the little things that make a day worth living. I joined a support group. Not because I needed to talk, but because I needed to listen. And in the faces of other women like me, I saw resilience in its rawest form. We cried together. We laughed too. One of them, Diane, had this wicked sense of humor and a sharp tongue. She became a friend. Sometimes she'd bring brownies. Sometimes she brought wine. We were warriors, survivors, ghosts in healing bodies. One evening I sat on the back porch wrapped in an old blanket, watching the sun disappear behind the trees. It was the kind of quiet that settles into your bones, not lonely, just still. And I realized I had never truly known myself until I had to carry myself through hell alone. In sickness, I had found my own strength. In abandonment, I had discovered self-worth. In silence, I had heard my soul whisper, "You are still here." Claire visited often. She brought me new books, fresh flowers, stories about her chaotic job and her terrible landlord. She no longer looked at me with that edge of fear in her eyes. Just love. And one day, as we stood in the kitchen chopping vegetables for a stew, she asked, "Do you think you'll ever fall in love again?" I paused, the knife stilled against the cutting board. "Maybe," I said, "but it won't be the kind of love I used to chase." She raised a brow. "What kind, then?" "The quiet kind," I answered. "The kind that doesn't vanish when things get hard. The kind that sits with you in silence and doesn't flinch at the ugly parts. And maybe I will. Maybe love, the right kind, will find me in a bookstore aisle or at a gallery opening or in the middle of a grocery store on a Tuesday. Or maybe it won't, but I've stopped waiting to be saved. Now, I save myself. Every morning I wake up and choose to begin again. I stretch, I walk, I water the plants, I write a few lines, I call someone I love. I've begun painting with light colors again. Yellows, pinks, sky blue. And every time I pick up the brush, I remind myself, I am not broken. I am becoming. This is not the life I imagined at 60. It is lonelier in some ways, quieter, sometimes harder. But it is mine, built not on someone else's promises, but on my own determination, on the love of a daughter, the kindness of strangers, the hard-won realization that I am enough, scarred, silver-haired, and whole. I do not know what tomorrow holds, but I know that if another storm comes, I'll face it, not with fear, but with fire, because I've already survived the kind of abandonment that was supposed to destroy me, and I'm still here.